Hello, sociology. Welcome to Sociology of Social Class in the United States. In last chapter, I mentioned that my goal is to show you that you're not really poor globally. In this chapter, I like to say that it's my goal to show you that you're not rich either, because social class is a large group of people who rank closely to one another in wealth, or property, power, and prestige. And so when we expand our view globally, there is tremendous wealth, and a lot of it is concentrated here in the United States in something that we call the superclass. The superclass consists of the top 400 to 1,000 wealthiest people in the United States, and they are multi-billionaires. So if we can define terms, wealth is the value of a person's assets minus their debts. So wealth consists of property and income and wealth, but income and wealth are not necessarily the same, because income is the amount of money that you have coming in annually, whereas it is not subtracted from your debts. If you make $60,000 a year, that's your income. You could actually make $60,000 a year and be average in terms of median income, but be severely in debt if your debt outweighs your income. So wealth is basically the value of all assets together minus debt. Power is your ability to get your way in spite of resistance. Another term that we use is agency. And agency is simply your ability to practice self-determination, right? Determining your own path. And prestige is the respect given to one's occupation. So occupational prestige and these other components of social class have something in common. These jobs typically pay more, they entail more abstract thought, they require more education, and they have greater autonomy. When you look at the concentration of the world's wealth, the wealthiest 10% of Americans own 33% or 70% of the nation's wealth. So I would say that 10 out of the top 100 Americans own 7 out of every $10, right? So 1% of Americans own 33% of the nation's wealth. So if we go back to the superclass would be the top 1%. They are sometimes referred to as 1%ers. And the elite or the superclass would be the wealthiest of the wealthiest 10% of Americans. And I'll have some charts to help you see and kind of grasp that. Status consistency occurs when a person has the same levels of power, property, and prestige, and they are consistent. Status inconsistency occurs when a person ranks higher on one level of social class and low on another level. People are status inconsistent, are more likely to be politically active, but they're also typically struggling in some areas. So for instance, a person who is status inconsistent could be a lottery winner. These individuals have very high degrees of wealth, typically very low degrees of income, because they're working class in many cases. Those the most likely to gamble and to hit it big historically. And so lottery winners are actually among the most oppressed individuals and rank lowest in terms of reported happiness. And this is oftentimes because their wealth alienates them. They may go out and buy a brand new house and brand new cars, yet their friends will seem alienated, thinking they're not like us anymore. The wealthiest, on the other hand, don't see them as belonging to the club either. So lots of low-ranking happiness among lottery winners. According to Marx, Karl Marx argued that there are just two capitalist classes, capitalist and the proletariat. Everyone else, he would say, would be inconsequential. Now, after Marx, Karl Marx, his theory sort of like breaks down. It actually was proven to be problematic because outside of the era in which he wrote it, it just kind of broke down. If you take America, for instance, America is a very dominant, powerful, capitalistic country, and there are not just two classes. There's not the bourgeoisie, who owns the means of production, and the proletariats. If you follow his theory to a T, proletariats would be everyone that's not Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and even LeBron James would be placed into this working class because he doesn't own the means of production. He doesn't own the Lakers. So the neo-Marxist sociologists such as Eric Wright have sort of tried to find a way to adapt Karl Marx's theory. And Wright suggests that some people are members of more than one class at the same time, that he calls contradictory class locations. Take a mechanic, for instance. A mechanic who becomes a business owner, he would really locate himself in two different contradictory classes at one time. So Wright comes up with four different classes: the capitalist, the true capitalist, the petty bourgeoisie, the managers, and workers. Gilbert and Call actually updated Weber's model, feeling that his theory broke down a little and could have been more relevant. So, according to Gilbert and Call, still aligning itself with the three Ps, which came from Max Weber. People are basically developing, or their social class derives from their property, power, and prestige. So Gilbert and Call argued you had the capitalist class, the upper middle, lower middle, the working class, the working poor, and the underclass. So if we look at social class in the automobile industry, for instance, the Ford Motor Company is owned by the Ford family, and they are the true capitalists because they are owners of the means of production. However, if you are a regional director or regional manager, and let's say you manage all of the Ford automotive manufacturers in the Southeast, you are the boss of these plants. You're still very powerful, and you still have a lot of property, and you have a lot of prestige. Now, according to strict Marxism, then you would actually not be the bourgeoisie. But according to Gilbert and Call and their adaptation of Max Weber, this person finds a place in the upper middle class, making several $100,000 a year. To take a look at a graph that gives us a lot of visual clarity based on Gilbert and Call in 1998 and again Gilbert in 2008, we see that the capitalists will make $1 million plus a year, and this makes up of 1% of the population. So this is the true upper class. Now, we would say that the super class is 1% of this 1%. LeBron James, who has an estimated net worth of nearly $400 to $500 million, is clearly in the capitalist class, according to Gilbert and Call. Even though he does not own the means of production, you'd say that he may not own the Lakers, but he owns many different other capitalist enterprises. but he would not be in the elite super class. That's reserved for people that are multi-billionaires. So those who own, for instance, Steve Ballmer owns the Clippers. He's worth around $6 billion. And people like Jeff Bezos, worth about $90 billion, make those others lower on the list look relatively poor. But actually, their accumulated wealth is comprised of about 30% of all wealth in the United States. The upper middle class that make $125,000 a year, college or university, often with postgraduate study, and they are made up of 15% of the population. The lower middle class, earning about $60,000 a year. In Mississippi, I say that the true middle class family could have a middle class life on about $45,000. If it's a two-wage income, that would bring it up to about $80,000. But one person making $60,000 is clearly middle class or upper middle in Southwest Mississippi. But nationally, that's below average. You look at the working class with high school education. These would include factory workers, clerical workers, low-paid retail, earning about $36,000 a year. The working poor with education that includes some high school, laborers, service workers, low-paid salesmen, making about $19,000 a year. And then finally, the underclass with some high school education, unemployed and part-time or on welfare, making less than $12,000 a year. And just as we have the super class, we also have the super wealthy, the super unwealthy, or the working poor. The working poor speaks to a group of people who are constantly working. They may be working 70 hours a week, and they're working hard. When I ask students, why are people poor? Inevitably, people cite things like personal choice, personal decisions, not taking advantage of opportunities. However, there are many wealthy people that haven't taken advantage of opportunities. They were just born into wealth. There are consequences of social class. We see the choice of husband and wife. Oftentimes, people marry individuals from similar social class locations. There's a higher divorce rate among the poor. There is less one-on-one time with parenting, oftentimes because parents are working more than one job. They may have their children public school, and then the children may go to an after program, so they're not spending as much time as the mom who is the stereotypical soccer mom, picking their kids up, taking them to soccer practice, picking them up and taking them to activities which cost money, which are directly targeted to this client, this child's gifts and skill set. Education, oftentimes education for the wealthy is private school that costs quite a lot of money. Religion has a way of dividing people as well according to socioeconomic status. So when you look at the religion of the wealthiest, so people of the Episcopal faith, people of the Jewish faith are among the highest in terms of annual income, whereas Baptists and more charismatic faiths are at the bottom. And what sociologists are interested in is that the religious groups that have the most lively and engaging and energetic services that are non-liturgical, that are not formal. These typically come from lower socioeconomic statuses. And students have oftentimes provided interesting opinions of this. Perhaps there's less pretense among lower socioeconomic status. Perhaps people there feel a greater freedom to sort of express themselves. Politics. Typically, those who are Republican come from middle to upper middle class, and those who are Democratic typically from working class, largely because Democrats have more social programs, more social welfare programs, whereas Republicans opt for less government or less social helps. And we see that oftentimes the mental health population is also looking different according to social class. So the wealthier individuals are going to therapists, but they are going to private, hourly based therapists who charge a lot more, whereas the poor folks will go to a community mental health. And we see physical health as well, that those from working class environments are oftentimes going to the emergency room more, whereas the wealthier class goes to the doctor more. So they're getting their annual checkups. They're getting healthy U visits for their kids. They're getting better prenatal care for their children, whereas the poor class are going to the emergency room more. So 3 types of social mobility. We see intergenerational mobility, which is essentially a change that occurs between generations. This can either be upward or downward. Also, structural mobility. This is a change in the social structure that causes a large number of people to move either up or down the social class ladder. We are basically right there now in COVID-19 in that we have gone through a very challenging financial time in our economy, and a lot of people were out of work, especially earlier on in the government shutdown and in the COVID-19 shutdown. And so when you look at structural mobility, if a large swath of the population now changes social class and they are depressed economically, this is seen as structural mobility. But generally speaking, there's usually the same amount of people in poverty, and this would speak to exchange mobility. A change in the social structure causes large numbers of people to move up and down social class ladder at the same time. But that basically means that there's the same number of people in poverty at any given time. The poverty line is a government figure. It is tallied when the government figures out the poverty line by taking low-cost food budget and multiplying it by 3. This poverty line formula was created in 1965, but it does not take into account family size and cost of living adjustments. So many people have suggested that the poverty line is actually way too low. Many people think it should be increased by as much as 50%, and this would put more people in poverty, or recognize, actually I think a lot of people in Mississippi would be listed at the national level as being below the poverty line, whereas according to our standard of living, perhaps many middle class people are doing okay that look on paper would look like they are not. When you look at who is poor, there is a clustering of poverty in the South. The rate of rural poverty is 16%, and this is higher than the national average of 13%. 9% of whites are poor in terms of race and ethnicity throughout the US, followed by Asian Americans at 11%. And the rate of poverty among Latinos is 21%. African Americans, it is 25%. And overall, 41% of all poor whites, 41% of all poor are whites. This is the largest group in the US. So these data may be confusing to you because you're looking at the stats and it says that 25% of African Americans are poor and 9% of whites are poor, yet there's more white people that are poor. How do you make sense of that? Well, it's basically this. There's far more Caucasians than there are African Americans. Of the 300 million US population, and that's an estimate, but 9% of 300 million is a much bigger number than African Americans are 12% of the population. Okay, so 25% of African Americans, that would make for roughly 30 to 40 million people, and 25% of 30 million people. So that's a lot less. However, the problem is that we see this percentage, it's a lack of representation. People who are black are poor at there's a higher likelihood that if you're born black, then you're going to be poor. So only 3, if you look at education, only 3 out of 100 people who finish college end up poor. Those are pretty good odds for you in college. If you can just finish, then you have reduced your likelihood of poverty significantly. The biggest subgroup living in poverty in the US are children. The group least likely to live in poverty are the elderly. So this phrase that might jump out at you on this slide is the feminization of poverty. It is the association of poverty with women, especially single-parent households headed by women. And the way this is happening is that women make less money than men on average, and women are more likely to be the primary caregiver for their children. So if you see a single parent, so a parent who is not married, who has kids, more times than not, that's going to be a woman. So a woman with kids is making less money than a man, and kids on the average in the US cost $115,000 over the $115,000 from the time they're born to the time they leave the house at 18. And if you think about that, if you cost your parents $115,000 or $125,000, that's a lot of money. So if you really divide that $125,000 by two people, assuming those responsibilities equally financially, well, then it's a little easier to manage. But when you have, say you have a single mom with 3 kids, and that's $300,000 that her children could cost her, and she's trying to support those kids on kind of a service sector minimum wage job, it's not really going to be very possible unless she gets some education. And so, not to discourage my single moms, because I have had some great students over the years that are single moms, but most of the time the scenario is this. I asked a student of mine once who had told me that she had a child. She was a freshman, so the child wasn't but about a year old. She would go to school full time, 8 to 3. She'd go to work from 3 to 11, working 40 hours a week. She'd pick up her child around 11, and she would have 1 hour a day with her child. And the child is not going to sleep till 12 and not taking a nap. So the child, that tells me, is not getting enough rest, and therefore is not developing as well as she could have. And it's just a lot on a single mom and a lot on those kids. 42% of the poor are living in the inner cities. When you look at the percentage of women with this education who give birth, what percentages are single and married? So this is births to single mom, and this is die in 2005. So when you look at when a woman is having a child and she is not a high school graduate, okay? So 55% of women giving birth that are not a high school graduate are unmarried. All right, and so if you move forward, moms that have a high school graduation, right, they are married 65% of the time. Okay, so you'd say about roughly 40% of unmarried women that have children have this high school graduation. And so you can see that the more college women have, the less likely they are to have children. And so it's almost like this reverse birth control, like staying in the school kind of secures income potential across the life, but it also kind of ensures that that a mom is not headed towards that feminization of poverty that we're talking about. And as I've said before in my classes, getting through high school, and if this didn't happen for you, I'm not saying, we're just talking about percentages at this point. I'd be glad to mentor you and help you get through, not just with this degree, but the next one, and make sure that you're picking the right college for you. And I've seen that as one of the most important jobs that I do. But if you just look at the statistics, getting through high school and graduating junior college, community college, and then college, and then getting a job, then getting married, so that you're saving up, paying down student debt, and after 6 months of marriage, people who have their first child at least 6 months after they get married, after they have a job, after they do college, there's almost no poverty among that subclass of people. So we see that there's the greatest concentration of poverty in the South. And there's been much debate about the dynamics of poverty. Some have suggested that certain cultures are more likely to be poor because of cultural reasons. There's something about their attitudes that really make them prime candidates for poverty. But sociologists reject this because most poverty is short-lived. So most people who are poor will remain poor for less than a year. And so this means that the number of those in poverty, this is a relatively stable number. So you have two competing points of view. Sociologists will argue and say that social structure is the cause of contributing to poverty. So this would be sort of like things like systemic racism, the need for education reform, criminal justice reform, the dropout to prison pipeline. All of these are ideas that sort of point to social structures being the enemy. In terms of characteristics of the individuals, people are poor because of their own attitudes. There are some sociologists that might say this, but they would say that because of like differential association theory, you have relationships that influence you at the micro level that lead to attitudes that lend itself to deviance, and therefore dropping out of high school, committing blue-collar crime, street crime. Sociologists will usually focus on social structure to explain poverty. The welfare system was restructured in 1996. This has caused some controversy, yet the welfare rolls plummeted, dropping by 60%. 3 out of 5 are still in poverty or back on welfare after coming out of the system. So many say, like prison reform, welfare reform is not rehabilitating Americans economically. The best predictor of getting out and staying out of welfare is education and finding a job. And where I go back to my psychology class, when psychologists look for those who rank the highest in terms of reported happiness, these are people who report having a job that they absolutely love. They have a job that they really enjoy going to. These people report being married to their best friend. Now, kids actually reverse the happiness report. Not that I'm recommending you don't have kids. There's actually a group of people, sociologists study, called DINKs, dual income, no kids. You take my marriage and family class, you'll learn about them. But the DINKs motto is we can have children or everything else. I'm not necessarily recommending that, but what I'm saying is that children are expensive, and they can tax individuals in terms of stress, because money is stressful. Kids cost a lot of money. However, the advantage is that as kids grow, there is a reverse in the happiness arc in terms of marriages. And people, by the time their kids graduate from high school, who are reportedly in a happy job and happy marriage, are the single most happiest people. And work-related stress and financial-related stress they really do sap individuals. I tell my students, if you can find a job you love, you never go to work a day in your life, and this really pays dividends into your culture and your community. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say in the discussion board writings. All right, take care.